Good morning. I call the December 13th, 2023 meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board to order. First order of business is the approval of minutes from October 23rd and November 8th. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 23rd, 2023 and November 8th, 2023?
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Jasinski,
Aye.
Ms. Jones-Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn. Aye. Chair votes aye, they are approved. Next in your packet is expenditure ledger. As you will note, we have not spent any funds yet in this fiscal year. We will be talking about our budget later in the meeting. Moving on to the new hire report. Vanessa.
Thank you. This report memo, excuse me, in your packet, we wanted to welcome Dean Novak as our new part-time building inspector. He's hit the ground running immediately, so that's been really helpful to the building department. We also welcomed Tim Barney as our new maintenance technician. He started just recently. In addition to that, we did receive a resignation from our full-time program report coordinator in the recreation department, Joe Durant, who's going on to an exciting opportunity in the town of Concord. So that position has just been posted.
Thank you. It's frustrating because we'd almost reached full capacity.
Correct. For less than 24 hours.
24 hours, yeah.
Well, it was good while it lasted.
We had a good run.
Yeah. Any questions about any of that? Seeing none, moving on to old business. So you have in your packet, and Chief Achilles will be joining us momentarily. I believe. But as he walks in the door, perfect timing. The document you have, in addition to Chief Achilles' memo, is a list of the amendments we discussed so far. The ones in bold are new that you haven't seen before. So we can talk about those today. I had hoped to vote on some or all of these today, but we are still awaiting sign off from Kate Federoff. So I think we have to hold off voting on any amendments. But before we go into the others, since the chief is here, do you want to say a word about why you're looking to change the title of the emergency management coordinator position?
Yes, so many of you know that I'm the emergency management director and the fire chief holds that position. And when I arrived here 4.5 years ago, one of our fire officers held the position of emergency management coordinator, if you will. And there was a stipend already established for that position. Another position that is not stipend is the position of deputy emergency management director. That position was held by the police chief. So when I got here, I was the emergency management director, the police chief was the deputy, and then we had a fire officer, which a lot of you know was Neil Spazey, was a coordinator and got a stipend. And that was the only stipend position in emergency management. Neil took a position with Northborough Fire Department this summer. And we were looking to make the emergency management a little more robust. And with a new police chief, I spoke to him if he would want to be the deputy emergency management director. He had a preference of not to do that with the roles responsibility he holds. And over the last year, we've been working with another town employee, a public health nurse, getting credentialed and experienced in emergency management. So I recommended that in the last month, I recommended to the select board that they appoint Taylor West as the deputy emergency management director. Taylor West, she's the public health nurse. To do that, that means she has the same authority and jurisdictional responsibilities as the emergency management director in my absence. So it's not a department head. What we were looking at is when we're doing that, because we didn't fill the emergency management coordinator, it made a lot of sense to at least provide that a stipend position to the deputy emergency management director person. And I think that's appropriate now because the deputy emergency management director is not a department head and has roles and responsibilities above and beyond her current position. Some of it, just like the Neil did, can be absorbed on when they're working normally, but some of it can't be. Plus they again have a statutory authority that they have to carry out. So we think this is a good way to, at least to start, providing that. So by putting it in the SAP where it sits and changing that title, we can address that.
Questions or comments for the chief?
I have a few.
Okay.
So chief, who has the appointment authority on this? Does this fall under strong chief bylaw and you as the sole appointing, or does the select board also have to appoint?
The select board appoints and they already have.
Okay. So then my next question is from Mark. Does the police chief's contract actually reference anything related to emergency management?
No.
Okay. I personally agree with the designation. I think it's candidly always been confusing where this was actually held by a union employee, not an SAP employee, but I think the only thing I would consider adding is, you know, some clarification, like this designation that we're putting the SAP only applies when there's a SAP employee holding the position. Maybe people think it's already clear, but I think in the past the union contract referred back to it. So like, as long as the chief and the select board have kind of a mechanism for dealing with the appointment, realizing that everyone will come with different experiences, you know, as these roles change. I'm fine with what's been proposed.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing that, again, we're gonna hold off voting on all of these for the time being, and if Chief, if you will stay in place, we'll
Yeah.
get to your other
I will.
issue quickly. So we really only need to talk about the items on the list of amendments that are in bold, are the only ones that are changed. We're free to talk about any other ones, but I wanted to focus on those. The first is section 9C. As you all know, currently the personnel director has the authority to hire up to the midpoint. And because we're going to be going to a grid, we thought it made sense to clarify what that meant going forward. So I arbitrarily took step 8. You could just as easily take step 7, but I think it needs to be one or the other. Any comments about that change? Seeing none. Okay. Item 10, we talked about last meeting. It was a request from Mr. Donovan to put the library associate back into Schedule A. Number 11 is just obviously replacing the salary schedule with the salary grid. And then item 12 is the item we just discussed. Any comments on any of those? Okay, I should mention one other thing, and this was brought to my attention by Mr. Thorburn. And this is an error I will take responsibility for. So you may remember in last January, we voted to, when we're combining Schedule C with Schedule A, we voted to put the part-time police dispatcher at job grade 4. For reasons that are unclear to me, it went into the warrant as a job grade 3. This has come up because the police department is in the process of hiring a part-time dispatcher. I have spoken with the chief about this, and I think we can deal with it. He doesn't foresee a problem, but obviously we need to fix it for the next go around. So I just wanted to alert the board to that. All right, if there's no further discussion, because the chief is here and not to take up too much of his time, I thought we'd jump down to item 5B on the agenda, and it's a reference in a memo from the chief on page 68 of your packet. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the chief for his service to the town. We're sorry to hear that you will be leaving us. You've been an articulate spokesman for the department. I know you've provided outstanding service to the town, and we want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So with that, I will let you, oh, there is one error in the chief's memo, and that has to do with the pay rate of the individual involved. It's actually 2604, not 2588.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. And I presented a memo to the personnel board chair and the personnel board reflective as I was preparing our FY 25 budget. And it was really housekeeping and an outstanding item that I felt was not appropriately and fully addressed last year. And many of you know that there was a reclassification and compensation evaluation. I don't need to go into the specifics of that with the board. But our department had a position that was an administrative assistant that through the Collins Center's evaluation, the initial recommendation was that it be a grade 5, moved up to a grade 5. It was one of the few positions that jumped maybe more than one step. And I supported that based on the position we had, the job description, and the roles and responsibilities of that position as they had evolved since I've been here. I know there was a lot of discussion by this board, and I'll say to this position specifically that they felt that was not an appropriate evaluation, and they asked the Collins Center to reevaluate. I did not agree with that position of the board. I think that was discussed in some of your meetings. Basically the board decided to keep it as a grade 4. I was very disappointed about that. So was the person in that position. I looked to see if at least after that was done, through correspondence with the chair, if I could meet again with the board to at least put them at a different, not what would be the starting step, but somewhere midpoint. I was directed through an email. I'm that basically that the board be looking in FY 24 to establish steps within the grades and reevaluate that. I haven't seen that. So when I was putting together my FY 25 budget, I put in the position at a what was established as the midpoint for that business administrator 1 position. I think the employee in that position's been in there 8 years, and unfortunately, since I've been here, there was no mechanism to ever get that position to midpoint. And I believe it's imperative at this point, even more specifically after my announcement, that we do everything to retain this employee. And I think it would, I would want you to strongly consider at least identifying that this midpoint request be accepted. And I'll answer any questions that you have.
Okay, and thank you, Chief. And the chief and I have chatted about this, and I'll tell the board what I told the chief, and I'll go through the reasons why I don't support making the change. I think there are 2 mechanisms within the SAP for a change in compensation mid-year, other than through a transfer or promotion. And one is through a reclassification. We had that discussion last year, as you rightly pointed out, and I told the chief he could add responsibilities to the job that might cause us to reclassify it. And then there's a mechanism under Section 7A. So my feeling is that when the employee was hired, the compensation they received, and let me start by saying this has nothing to do with the individual
Correct.
in the position or how good they're doing at their job. We're not talking about that. So the rate of pay the employee received when they were hired was deemed reasonable by the employee and obviously by the department. And since that time, the employee has received the same percentage increases as every other employee. So, I understand, and I would believe it's common among town employees that there's a feeling that they're underpaid, and some of them, there may be many of them who, on our commitment can be made are. But I think it's problematic for this board to be saying, this employee, we think we should do something for, because I think we're going to be inundated with other people coming forward saying, well, why shouldn't I get something as well? So that's the first part. Second part is under section 7A. It deals with this. It says, except this may be authorized by the personnel board in exceptional circumstances, such increase, meaning the one that employees get on July 1, is not to exceed one increase in any single 12-month period. I'll stop there. So there have to be, under the SAP, exceptional circumstances. Now, I've been on the board for 5.5 years, and we've never had a case where we've granted an increase mid-year. And in talking to Mark and Vanessa and Brian, they cited a few examples, but they were all cases where the employee clearly went way above and beyond their normal job duties. So it was done almost as a bonus for that kind of performance. I just don't see anything here which meets the exceptional circumstances criteria, which we're bound by. So for those reasons, I don't support making the change, but I will open it up to other members for comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just,
Sure.
and I respect the position of the chair, and I would actually agree, except for one significant point. If this was never identified through the reclassification and the review of the job as a business administrator 2, then I would agree. Unfortunately, it was, and for a long time during that process, it was recognized as that position. And unfortunately, the board at that time did not agree and went back to the Collins Centers to have it reevaluated, which I thought, and I will, frankly say, I thought was bad form. So you cite what would allow the increase to occur. That was done a year and a half ago. It identified significantly what the job position changed to get to a business administrator 2, but it was rolled back to a business administrator 1. The second part is I agree that you can't always link the position with a person. However, we have an employee that knows what the process was, knows what she does, and knows what I recommended her to have, and realizes now that if this is not done, employee retention is going to be impacted. And I don't think that's a good thing for this town or our department in the next 6 months to have this happen. So again, if this was a business administrator 1 right off the bat, I wouldn't be here in front of you. But that's not what happened.
Okay, just to clarify, it wasn't that the board simply said that position, we don't agree with it. There were a number of recommendations in the original report that the board asked the Collins Center to revisit. And it was part of that process where the Collins Center did invest additional interviews, additional reviews, and modified their recommendations, not just in this case, but in other cases as well. We obviously were very much involved in the process, but that report, the original report, was just an initial recommendation to the board. The board gets to decide these things. It's not the Collins Center. So the fact that the Collins Center made an initial recommendation should not have been taken as, okay, anyone is getting that changed. But with that, again, I'll open it up to other members of the board for comments or questions. John, go ahead.
This person is currently an A4.
Yeah, I believe it's Business Administrator 1, which is a grade
Administrator 1A.
grade 4, and they're at the lowest level.
Well, they're not at the minimum.
They're just above the minimum. Is that correct?
They're 16 cents an hour above the minimum.
Okay, so 16 cents above the minimum.
You were under the impression that it was gonna be a Business Administrator 2.
Yes.
Never heard that.
Well, I take to differ. That was in the report.
It was in the original Collins Center report. Other comments, questions?
Yeah, I'll weigh in here. So Barry, I'm gonna echo kind of your last comment in particular. There's no reason for us to be a personnel board if we don't, have the ability to react to kind of an outside consultant's recommendations. Yeah, do I wish that wasn't public before? But that's the point of public meetings, right? Is recommendation was made, and we reviewed it for consistency. We had some discussions with the Collins Center to make sure that they understood, as we compared across. I do think there's just a holistic problem though with Business Administrator 1 and 2. We continue to have this, right? And we used to have it when there was more people in this executive assistant range, which I think was an A3, which is I think where this position was before the reclassification. So I think it's, and there's a few things I would say in terms of how we move this forward. One, this position did get a grade increase last year, right? They went from an A3 to an A4, right? To go two grades is significant, and maybe was warranted. And I respect the chief and the individual that holds this position's reasoning behind that. But I think there was only 1 or 2 instances where we actually found that was the case across the town. I also agree with Barry's statement that if we take any action here, and I think there's a question of whether we even can, based on the wording that Barry outlined, it will have a cascading effect across every department. And we will have memos from every department head for anyone that's at the lower end of their range in future meetings. I can almost guarantee that. And I think we need to take a step back here. I think we need to acknowledge that there's potentially an issue here. I think we knew there was an issue when we have, I think the chief cited 8 years of tenure with this employee. We have many others that have greater than 8 years of tenure that are at absolutely the bottom step, like literally the low end of the range, that are in department head positions that have a longer tenure at the town. So I think optically, I get why there's concern around this. What I would propose we do, instead of focusing on this one position, and I realize it doesn't solve your issue today, Chief, but it may in short order, is I think we need to work with Mark to outline a process, and potentially there's one more thing that needs to go into our amendments for town meeting that give the personnel director some leeway here related to existing employees, because there is nothing in the SAP that allows that now for, I believe, either the personnel board or the personnel director. And I think what I can speak to for what other municipalities do is they do have a mechanism to deal with these situations when a department head believes there are extenuating circumstances related to their department, and can go make their case, whether it's to the personnel board or to the personnel director. I think that's the path I would like to go, because I just really hesitate if no matter how warranted this is or isn't, and I'm being very careful not to opine on that because I don't think we have an ability to opine. What I'm trying to do is fix the problem. and do it in a way that's fair to all employees, not just to one particular situation we currently have in town. So I'd be willing to work with anyone on that so that it gets effectuated at town meeting if the voters are so inclined.
And if I could, for Jason and the rest of the board, my request is not to move this position to business administrator 2. Again, it's just to move up within the grade that was approved, an appropriate adjustment. So in case that gets lost, I want to make sure that I'm not looking to move it.
I understand that, Chief, but if you move even to midpoint in A4, you're actually higher than the low point in A5. So
But is that a reflection of what you guys designed or adopted?
I think there's different ways to look at it. We're trying to solve for a lot of things. I personally am one to say that we were on a very antiquated system. I believe this board has been incredibly progressive with what we're trying to do with the steps moving forward. And if you look at least what's proposed right now, subject to the will of town meeting, employees will be getting an automatic 2% every year before a COLA. That was stripped a long time ago, before a lot of people you see on the screen and in the room were here to effectuate that. So we're trying to make progress. Those low end of the ranges went up significantly as a result of the Collins Center. And it's not perfect. Municipal, I think we all know that public municipal, the way that compensation is done is not perfect and usually trails behind what obviously the private sector has the ability to do. So yeah, is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not. But I don't think you're going to find any town that's perfect. I think all we can do is try to get it more in line. And I would think that as we work towards a solution, I think part of this is if, for example, in your particular instance, if Mark had the ability as the personnel director to take a step back and say, okay, chief, these are this person's responsibilities. What are other towns compensating for a similar position? Realizing that every town's going to have its nuances, especially larger, smaller, et cetera. And that there was compelling data to make a change in the moment, or there's changing circumstances in your department, which seems to be the genesis behind a lot of this particular request this time. I think that would be something I would certainly support, because at the end of the day, that's, in my opinion, a management right, in something that we hopefully should be able to empower whoever holds the town administrator role to make some decisions on, with a conscious effort to make sure that no one department or employee are ever favored.
And I appreciate that. I just, to one of your points, it's just discouraging that, and the chair corrected me, this position is getting 16 cents over minimum. I wish there was a way to fix that. I think that's, and I can only speak to my employee, I'm sure this is occurring throughout SAP in certain circumstances, but unfortunately, I only have one of those employees, not the group. So
yeah, but chief, most people are 0 cents above the min.
I don't think that's correct either.
Well, because we did significantly increase the minimums of the job grade, so we do find people who are close to the min. John?
Jason, can you hear me?
I can.
Is this a problem that can be addressed with the new grid that takes effect July 1st?
The only way that I could see, and welcome the thoughts of others, is whether we did a process, right, which I candidly don't have an appetite for, just given what it took to get to this point, to regrid everyone, right? So that, like, let's just say this person was at a step 2. I believe that's where they're at, chief, but just bear with me for a second. I think where the chief's leaning towards is if you stay within this grade, that person would be closer to a step 8, step 9. how do you measure and determine that, and then do that for every other employee? I think it's part of what I think, I think my short answer, John, is no. I think that would be even uglier, and potentially unfair or biased in some ways, depending on how you do that. I stand by my comment of, I think we need to find a way to empower the town administrator and or the personnel board to have more leniency with these situations. And I do sympathize to an extent with the chief's situation here. And I would also encourage the chief to, there's been a lot of reorganization in your department. I realize that was with collective bargaining employees over the past couple of years. You've had a lot of tenured employees leave, I think, as you cited when we're talking about the emergency management. Go back, and I think Barry alluded to this already. Go back and look at the job description in the appendix that you submitted last year, and make sure that everything that employee is doing is encapsulated there. And that's the quickest resolution to your current situation related to your department.
John, go ahead.
Have we had previously voted that when this grid takes effect, right? If there's somebody above or below, and how they fit on the grid, we have the ability to adjust that, right?
Not really. They're going to automatically be put on the grid based on what their compensation would be after receiving a 4.5% increase, and they would go, for the most part, to the next highest step.
All right.
Other comments, questions for the chief? Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this? Let me put it that way. Seeing none, I think we're all sympathetic to the situation, but again, I have the concern, Jason voiced it as well, that if we were to do something here, we would just be overwhelmed with requests from other department heads to make changes, and we just don't have a mechanism to do it in any way that I would consider fair or reasonable. So,
and I respect the board's position. I don't agree, and I think this is going to have a lot larger implications this year. I hope you come up with a resolution, not just for the SAP employee in my department, but the whole town, because I think this is going to be a bigger issue that unfortunately I think it's going to have negative implications townwide. So I wish you luck in that endeavor.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. We have tried to hit it somewhat with, I think, what are the two largest annual increases, certainly in the last decade, probably longer. So we're trying to address it. We know where we are, but it's difficult. Mark, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing while the chief was still here. I think that, I agree. I hear what the chief is saying. I hear what the board is saying. And while I appreciate Mr. Malinowski's comments, a lot of the things that he is suggesting that I could be empowered with, really are vested in the position of a town manager or a chartered position. So, but that's a whole nother road. But the one thing I wanted to speak to with regard to this conversation is we really don't have an ability in our SAP, and I'm not sure how to do it, but something in terms of a retention, ability to address retention when an employee comes to us and says, I'm leaving, and I'm leaving for another job. I'm going to be making X. And we have no ability to try to retain that person. That person is now leaving with X amount of experience from us, with job knowledge inherent to Southborough. And the frustrating part is that we will likely, whatever that employee would be asking for to stay, we're likely going to have to pay that amount to bring in a new person who may or may not have that same level of expertise, of experience, you know, and obviously it's not the same knowledge base as Southborough. So you know, we put a lot of things on the table this morning. I'll add one more, you know, to try to find a way where we can be responsive to retaining employees when these opportunities come up. When the frustrating piece is we're going to have to pay probably what they're asking to find a replacement if they should leave. So I'm not asking for a solution. I'm just putting that out there, that's something I think we should think about. You know, maybe it should be something to begin to look at, you know, after town meeting, and maybe, you know, seeing if we can come up with something for next year's SAP.
Yeah, certainly the structure of town government is an impediment to solving this in a fair and reasonable way. But I certainly support the notion that we should have some way of dealing with those situations and of just addressing whatever inequities there are. I mean, we do the salary study and that's helpful, but they're not looking at the actual pay of each individual. They're looking at, are they in the appropriate job grade? And those are two related but different things. And we should probably be focused on the latter. We focused on the job grade, but we probably have to figure out a way how we can do this equitably. But it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
And
Thank you.
good luck in it. Yeah, good.
Barry, can I just I'm going to put a motion on the table just to, it's not related to specific, the fire department position, but I am going to move that the personnel board request the town administrator and or his designee to research between this meeting and our January meeting other tools that towns are using related to retention with town administrator structures, so that we can try to effectuate wording for this year's, the 2024 annual town meeting.
Okay.
So that's my motion.
Mark, any comment on?
No, I think I'm fine. I would only clarify Mr. Malinowski's comment that it's not necessarily town administrator, but it's non-chartered positions. So a chartered position, I was in a town administrator position. It had a charter, very strong. It was a town manager authority with a town administrator title. So you know, so non-chartered
That's
positions.
fair.
That's
fair.
what he's looking for. Okay.
Okay. John, did you want to?
I will say, chief, having been a fire chief, that position that we're talking about is very, very important. Very important.
Especially as we don't have a deputy.
And to lose the person in that position that's been there for 8 years. I really think we've got to do something about that, because that would be, I don't want to use the word catastrophic, but it would, put an irreplaceable initiative. In.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion on the floor? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Jasinski,
Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson,
Michelle, you're muted.
Aye. Did you hear me this time?
we did that time.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That's approved. Chief, thank you for
Thank you very
your
much.
service and good luck.
Have a good day. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, going back to the agenda, we're on item 4B, which is just the updated performance appraisal policy, which we agreed to revise pursuant to the request from Mr. Donovan with regard to certain library employees. That document is in your packet at page 26. We need to formally approve the revised policy. Is there any discussion about the policy? Okay, I will then move that we approve the revised policy on employee performance evaluations for salary increase for Schedule A employees under Section A of the Personnel Bylaw that is in your packets. Is there a second? Second. Just a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Jasinski. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson.
Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that is approved. Okay, we now move into job descriptions, and we've got a number of them, two of which are returned to us after we requested some changes. I have an overall question and a specific question. On the executive assistant job description, it doesn't have a date for approved by. Was that approved by select board?
Select board. We didn't put the date in, the select board approval.
Yes, yeah, it was. We just need to put the
Okay.
date in.
And I would like to see the name of the appointing authority in there, not just the date. So I'd like to see select board across the board.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments or questions about the first two, the assistant town administrator and the executive assistant to the select board job descriptions? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the assistant town administrator job description and the executive assistant to the select board job description? Second. Someone?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, Ms. Jasinski,
Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, those are approved. Okay, moving on to the new group of 9. And I have some, what I would refer to as typographical things that I don't think warrant discussing at the meeting. You know, sort of Scrivener errors that can be addressed. Does anyone have, just checking through, does anyone have substantive comments or questions about any of the 9 job descriptions in the packet? Seeing none, I will make a motion that the personnel board approve job descriptions listed in the agenda numbers 1 through 9. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Ms. Jasinski,
Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn. Aye. Chair votes aye, those are approved. They should all be so easy. Thank you for your cooperation in that. That's just good progress. We still have a long way to go in those, but we're getting there. Okay, moving on to item 5C in the packet, you have a memo on this from Mr. Purple. I believe we struggle every year with finding topics for training that are worthwhile and needed. And we end up getting to the end of the year and rushing to spend the money that's in our budget. So I think it was Mr. Malinowski's suggestion, we try to address this earlier, with which I heartily agree. So this is a first step at doing that. I should note that Vanessa did send out a survey to employees, did not get a lot of feedback on that, and she can talk about that, but let's start by addressing the specific proposal from Mr. Purple. Mark, do you want to speak to?
So I think what I'll do, I'm not gonna step on Miss Hale's toes. You know, she and Mr. Ballantyne had worked on this proposal and then brought this to me, and you know, and it sounded like a great idea. You know, looking at the topic of succession planning, again, something you think that, you know, wouldn't necessarily be as important as is in a small organization where you've got, you know, sometimes 1 and 2 person departments. But we have seen a lot of movement across departments, you know, in the 11 years I've been here. And so I do think it's important to have conversations about how to make employees prepared and to understand what employees' needs are for those opportunities when they become available. And, you know, how do we make sure we're not going to have, you know, leadership gaps, you know, when we do have our department heads and our senior people leave and we've got people who are ready, you know, for those opportunities. So maybe I've just stepped on Ms. Hale's toes in doing what I did, but I would turn it over to her. She and Mr. Ballantyne have done the bulk of the work on this one.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. So the proposal before you is for a 2-part workshop on succession planning. That's not something we really talked about a lot, you know, in my time here. And, you know, Brian and I have been looking at, you know, the structure of our departments, you know, the employees and how many we think are really, you know, getting closer to retirement. And, you know, as the memo states, you know, in the next 6 to 8 years, you know, we can count on, you know, 6 we're pretty sure of, and probably, you know, 12, 13, 14 when we look at people that may potentially be looking to retire in that time frame. So the proposal, you know, before you is to work with a facilitator that, you know, Brian and I, you know, both know from our, you know, tenure in our state associations and so forth. The first workshop would really be explaining to all of our SAP employees, you know, what succession planning is, you know, and why it's important. And, you know, as Mark said, you know, even in a small town like Southborough, if we had, you know, a gap or an unexpected, you know, leave of absence or something, you know, for 3 to 6 months, you know, we'd be in a very difficult place. So we want to look at how can we develop the employees and retain them, as of course we've already been talking about today, in our important roles, and how do we advance people that are still here and get them ready for those promotional opportunities. So we built this out with this consultant, Julie Jacobson, who is a retired town manager, to talk about, you know, what we can do to budget for professional development, you know, what resources we can identify for people that are interested in advancing and doing that work to figure out, you know, who is interested in moving up from their current role. So that would really be the first part of the workshop. And the second part would be more geared toward department heads to look at, you know, developing a list of certification programs and, you know, municipal training opportunities. And importantly, you know, how do we fund those opportunities? You know, right now, we of course have $5,000 in your budget for tuition reimbursement. You know, that is not used every year. It seems to go, you know, it ebbs and flows on people looking for that tuition reimbursement. In the past, that money has been used, you know, specifically for academic reimbursements, you know, to a college accredited program. So, you know, we often do have requests and conversations about, oh, I'd like to get into that MMA Suffolk certificate program, you know, which is around 22 or 2,500, I think. And that's not the kind of thing that most departments really have the ability to fund. So, you know, I think that's a component of this conversation. Could we use that $5,000 for certification programs or other kinds of leadership development programs if there were no one looking for tuition reimbursement in that particular year? For this year, you'll know that at your December meeting, in fact, because the deadline is later, at the end of this month. So we're really looking for that second workshop as part of this series to gear into leadership development alternatives and what can we do to help make sure that we can promote internally in the future.
Thank you. Couple of points. I think all of you know that there are a number of opportunities for training for employees that don't cost the town anything because of our insurance and otherwise. So there's a whole range of topics, the sort of normal topics you would think about for training that we can get for nothing. So it's somewhat of a challenge to find programs that go beyond what those do. The other thing, and I've had discussions with Mark and Vanessa about this, it's sort of a challenge to draw the line between employee development, which would typically be the responsibility of the department head in terms of the performance appraisal and planning on what their needs are, and this kind of training. I mean, I think they're distinct, but there's certainly some overlap in it. So I think we need to think about that. But I will open up first just to get people's general thoughts about the idea of this subject as something that we are interested in spending training funds on. What are people's thoughts about that? John?
How many departments, most of these departments come under Mark's. Would be Mark that would, I know you have the facilities, that's one. How many department heads actually would need something like this, or how many would be involved?
Well, it would be open to all departments, certainly.
Department heads.
Yes, I mean, the way we're looking at this is sort of a two-part workshop. The first one would be open to all SAP employees, and the second one certainly wouldn't be closed to anybody else, but it would be geared a little bit more toward current department heads.
Yeah, but how many department heads do we have?
I'd say, about 20, so
Roughly 20.
roughly 20.
Under the SAP?
No, well, you've got, that includes your chiefs. That's going to include your DPW superintendent. So you got to remember, personnel board is the one board that cuts across all the appointed, elected, and everything in that. But there are some SAP employees in those departments.
I'm sorry, I thought we were just talking about it's under the SAP. I understand now. It's townwide. Okay.
The other, how do people feel about the notion of that training specifically, just generally?
Yeah, I did want to speak to that. It was always surprising to me that we would end the year with money in our training budget. I think we really have to be very intentional about understanding that learning. So sometimes people focus on the training, but the learning opportunities are also part of how we can help support employees, their engagement and their retention. So I like the fact that we're looking at it from that, we're looking at it from succession in terms of thinking about where our department heads are going to be in the next several years. And so we're having a future outlook in terms of making sure that we have the right talent and leadership available. But there also are opportunities for career development for people that do not wish to necessarily become a department head. And what are those opportunities? How do we have some consistency around looking at competencies across the board and then sort of creating learning opportunities for that? So I would like to see us be very much more intentional about using whatever resources we have for helping people learn and build skills. Some people may not wish to go back and get a 4-year, get a degree, but how do we help people build skills? And also, how do we ensure that we have the right people in place for promotional opportunities and leadership opportunities?
Okay,
I'm just gonna ditto a lot of what Michelle just said, so I'm not gonna expand on it. I think we need to be very intentional and realize that people aren't going to be department heads in some instances and don't want to be, regardless of the 4-year education part or not. And even if we evolve in how we think about education, like that they come in with, I think, I think a big part of succession planning is also the talent you're hiring and what their intentions are, depending upon the time you're hiring, right? So if you're hiring someone into your department and you have 3 years left, and that's a well-known fact, and there's no uncertain changes, I think that should be part of your recruitment process too. So not necessarily against the program, but I don't know. I'm not like pounding the table for it either. I think there's ways it's necessary, but is that the right use of our money, considering the breadth of our town departments and what we're trying to accomplish more broadly?
Marianne, morning.
I'm for any type of training that helps improve the departments, the employees, and helps them. So, I mean, if we want to give this a shot and see how it works, I'm in favor.
Yeah, I would just like to understand more about, is it, Jason, are you feeling, you said you're lukewarm on the program. Is it the succession planning part or is it the career development part? I'm just curious about.
Yeah.
What's your.
I think it's definitely benefit. I think it's important. I think the most important thing that this memo did for me was really highlight the number of people that we're going to really need to replace over the next couple of years. And we know from other recruitments, sometimes the people within the department want to step up. And then a lot of times they actually are very comfortable, and we're looking outside for a different leadership and a different path forward and a different way of approaching things. So, query how many of these roles will actually be filled internally, right? And if they're not going to be filled internally, then the return on this investment, and I realize it's a light investment in the broad scheme of a $50+ million budget. That's where my lukewarm was coming from.
Yeah.
However, with all that being said, and I'm somewhat contradicting myself here, and I realize it, is I do think when you start talking succession planning, and I have witnessed this very recently, people that are adamant against it, right? Like they were the person that was quote unquote next in line, but they knew they weren't going to want it. It can start to elicit different thoughts about their own career paths and convert someone from wanting to potentially never seek that job to changing their behaviors and changing their mindset. So to Dorian's point, I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm just questioning how many people it's really going to have, a reinforcing impact on, or, a strong impact on. But I don't think until you can try it. And we've done a bunch of other things, like Barry noted, that are already free that you maybe would be paying someone for in the private sector.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm glad we circled back. And I know you have a consultant you're working with, but I'm also very happy to help support this effort, because I think there is a way that you can do some assessment around readiness, around where people are. There are some people that would like to sort of elevate in the role or in a different role. And there's some people that want to broaden what they do, have more responsibility, and sort of, so I just think that there's some opportunity here to take a deeper dive into where people are in terms of their career paths and career goals. And I think people would appreciate knowing that we want to invest in that one way or the other. So let me know how I can be helpful if we decide to move forward with this.
Well, I appreciate that. And this is an area where I know you have particular expertise, certainly among the group here, that we would like to take advantage of. So we appreciate that. I think it's true that most of the programs or most subjects that would be of general interest and value to a wide range of employees, those are exactly the type of programs we can get for free. So it's really picking out other programs that might have a more limited audience, but are important generally for the town and for certain employees. What I'm hearing is that employees are generally, and I said employees, the board members are generally supportive of moving forward with this proposal. I did have a question. It just struck me that in looking at the CV of the proposed instructor and the skills, she doesn't list succession planning or training. Now, I guess it could be incorporated, it could be included in some of the more general language, but it just caused me some concern that clearly the person has extensive experience in town management, but do they have any particular expertise in succession planning? I say that because my son does this for a living. So it's not something that just because you run an organization, you know how to do that or know how to train others to do that. So what causes you to think that this is the right person to do that training?
Do you want to jump in?
I can try.
Yeah.
I actually saw, well, I know Julie, but I actually, my organization had a workshop with her recently for the first time this year. She's doing this consultant type of stuff, but her background was in Auburn, and she had to, first of all, she gave her workshop on, part of it was definitely succession planning, but they did some reorganizations and some key positions had left Auburn. And so she had real-time experience with that. She had to, what ended up happening actually is some of the finance people, they moved around, and I think town accountant and finance director is now the town manager. So he rose up and they had this big plan. So she, her experience basically, I think she had a lot of just street experience, and she was great. I really like her. She's a very smart girl. She's obviously very smart. I think it would be worth a try. Her cost is pretty low too, so I think it's very reasonable. So
Low risk, high reward.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she gets an A from me.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, what's that? Dorian or Michelle? It was Dorian.
I have a question. How are we gonna set this up? Are we gonna ask the SAP employees to sign up for this first session? And what if we only have one person? I mean, what are we gonna, while I'm supportive of this, if there's only gonna be one person show up for this or two, is it worth doing? So that way,
I can.
sure,
Right,
or show for the
that.
town as well with her. So I don't want that to happen. So how is this going to be?
Right, so I am very confident we will have more than one person. Generally, we put out these, invitations to all staff about, the workshop and what it's about and why we think it's valuable. If we start to see not a lot of people signing up, Dorian, then we would go through the department heads and talk to them specifically about, this is really important. Could you really encourage people to attend this? And certainly when we choose a date with this consultant, we would do that in communication with all departments. So we didn't pick, an opportune day or the day before the long weekend in January or something, or the day, town reports are due. So we would work in multiple ways to make sure we had a good turnout.
Okay, because while it's a small amount of money, it's still $1,500 we don't want to throw away. So, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, I would just want to understand more about the process. the consultant would use, what the deliverables would be, and how we would actually, what the execution plan would be for this. Because what we don't want is to have, I mean, we'll have one session, but the point of this is to have a more comprehensive plan that we could actually leverage for the future. And what I don't want is to not have that as the deliverable and the end result, and then talking about timeline and then how we actually execute it going forward. So I guess I feel like I want to just go back to, Barry's point about making sure we have the right expertise for this particular aspect of this work for succession planning and career development, to make sure we have the right and a very robust person that or skill set, I shouldn't say person, skill set that could help us move this forward in the way that we hope.
All right,
So-
I'm gonna make a suggestion, and I'm gonna hopefully volunteer you, Michelle, that we defer voting on this until maybe, Michelle, you can sit down with Ryan and Vanessa, or just Vanessa,
Yeah.
whoever is appropriate, and make sure you're comfortable, because again, this is more than any of us, this is your area of expertise, and make sure you're comfortable with the direction and the setup and the individual who's going to be teaching it. And then we can revisit it at our next meeting if you're willing to do that.
I'm happy to do that. And also just thinking also about Dorian's point, thinking about the way in which we introduce it, and maybe we have to think about the sequence of doing that so that people, so we can create a very compelling topic and sort of series perhaps of things that people would employees would be interested in and coming to, and we build toward that sort of last piece around succession. So I just want to spend a little bit of time, if that's okay, Vanessa and Mark, with you to talk through this a little bit more, perhaps if the consultant is available. I just want to make sure that if we're going to invest in this, I want to just make sure that we get what we need from it longer term.
Yeah, I appreciate your efforts for that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and especially if we can have Ms. Jacobson involved in that discussion, so we can make sure that this is tailored, to exactly what we're looking for, and we get the kind of outcomes we're looking for. So no, I appreciate that. I was going to offer that you could introduce her when you come to audit the session on behalf of the personnel board.
I'll do whatever you ask me to.
All right, John, you
I would just comment that, as far as succession goes, I think it's a responsibility of the department head to prepare his staff, or her staff, for succession. I know in the fire department, I thought any chief that didn't have two people to be considered for the next position is derelict in his duty. Department head should be grooming through giving them responsibilities, or whatever, to try to be in line for succession. And I think probably the training should include with the department heads teaching them how to do that, how to prepare for it.
I absolutely agree with you, but remember, someone who's in your department may not be leading your department. They may end up leading another department. Case in point, our facilities director used to be what is now the business administrator position in DPW, right? He's a great facilities director. Would you have thought that, your facilities director was coming out of DPW? Maybe, that could be. So, we have people, and I'm not going to identify people here, but there are people in other departments that I could envision based on their skill set in other roles in other departments at some point in the future if those opportunities, came up. So how do you, having those conversations and making sure that people understand how to have those conversations and bringing that out in these employees to understand where they want to be and understanding that it's okay if you're not going to be in, say, the treasurer's department for the rest of your career. You want to be maybe in, doing something different. So, but you got to know about those so that you can help to nurture them.
All right, so I think we're going to defer that to our next meeting. Moving on to our budget. And as I said at the outset, we have not spent any money this year, so we move on to thinking about what we may or may not spend next year. The first item is tuition reimbursement, which is always a challenge. It's either feast or famine. We have had years where we spent all of the 5,000, not frequently, and we have several years where we don't spend anything. Part of it may go to Vanessa's comment earlier about what we have traditionally been willing to use those resources for. I think to this point, we've only used them for college programs.
I think a number of years ago, we may have helped people pay for, a certification class or, exam they needed to take, for their certification, but it's been many, many years since we've done that.
Okay. So sort of the default position has always been, let's just put 5,000 in the budget there. But I'm open to people's comments on that.
Yeah, I would like to see us just revisit what we can use those funds for. If obviously college tuition is one opportunity, there may be other really critical certifications that we may need to support or that we want to support. I just would like to revisit that and look at what's happening sort of now for the organization, especially as we talk about career development and potentially succession planning. Like, how are we going to also support that? So we may want to think differently about how we use those funds.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at our policy on tuition reimbursement and see if we want to update it or broaden it. So I think that makes sense. Is there anyone who doesn't think we should include the 5,000 that we have historically included? Put it that way. Not seeing anyone. So let's leave the 5,000 in for that. Okay. Consulting and professional services. As you see, we have 2,500 in this year's budget. To date, we have spent none of it. It's possible we may spend some of it. I, at least sitting here now, can't foresee a situation where we'll spend anywhere close to $2,500 this year. And Vanessa, you can correct me if I'm missing something.
I will add one comment on that if I may.
Go ahead.
I think that goes back to the conversation, the board just had about the types of certification programs or professional development. When we did this really, really quick survey last week about employee training, that's one of the questions we asked, is there any kind of program that would really be beneficial to you? And there were a number of things that did come back on that. So I wouldn't say, we would not spend what we have this year. But I think that does correlate back to, would you be willing to entertain individual requests for special or, maybe professional development opportunities that might be a little bit more expensive than a normal department budget could handle.
Okay, but you're going back to the tuition reimbursement piece.
I wasn't talking about more in general about, the funds that you have right now that are unexpended.
Well, I think
we will know at the January meeting if you have any requests for academic tuition reimbursement this year.
okay, but to Michelle's point, I think at next month's meeting, we'll talk about if we want to broaden the policy, and then we can see, we can deal with that, I think. But on consulting and professional services, particularly since Kate doesn't cost us anything. The only consultant I can foresee us using is possibly a compensation consultant. And we may have some situations where we may or may not need that. But I think it should be relatively minimal. I can't foresee any reason why we'd want to put more than 2,500 in next year's budget. Is 2,500 okay with people?
Yes.
Okay, let's pencil in 2,500.
Guess I want to ask Mark and Vanessa, I'm looking at this budget here. We spent 5,000 this year. Is that what, am I reading it correctly? For 2023?
And
That's what's budgeted right now. We have not expended anything from that line item yet.
Okay, I got you. Thank you very much. Mhm. So then, since we haven't expended it, we're going to decrease it to the 2,500 for next year.
yeah, 2,500 is our budget for this year. The 5,000 we spent last fiscal year was.
I'm
to pay
sorry,
for the
fiscal year,
salaries.
correct. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, and we get to employee development, and you'll recall we added, I'm trying to remember the number, either $3,000 or $4,000 at the select board's request for the current fiscal year to do diversity training. Typically, as you can see, we have spent considerably less than that.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
So, after Brian and Mark and I were reviewing the results of some of this really quick survey, we were taking a look at, what do we generally look to for employee training? Primarily that's MIA, the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association, which is the town's insurance company, which provides a lot of free training. As the chair commented earlier on things like respectful workplace, customer service, working with difficult people, diversity awareness. Those sessions are generally there. They still have some in-person sessions, which are no cost to the town. Many of them have reverted to a webinar format. You do have to keep your camera on the whole time in order to get credit for attending that session. So sometimes folks just don't want to always do that, or they're trying to just listen in the background. So you do need to keep your camera on to attend those sessions and get credit for it. Through the MMA, since the pandemic, they have developed a really, broad library of webinars that we have access to. Again, some of the at no cost topics would be running an effective meeting, regulating comments at public meetings. Everybody knows Southborough has been in the forefront of that story. Effective constituent communication, grants 101, a beginner's guide. They also have developed some paid content, and those workshops would be $45 each, but we would then have the permanent link to that video. So it could be shown at any time. People could do it on their own, or in a group setting. So that is what MMA and Maya currently offers. There are some, I just shared some information this week with staff about a procurement overview that the Division of Labor Services is doing. That is something else that came up in the quick employee survey, was procurement and really understanding, and not everybody is involved in that, and not everybody has had exposure to that. So many years ago, the Inspector General's office used to come out and do field classes, across the state. Because if you've ever attended those classes before, they're in downtown Boston. It's 3 full days. They are now doing virtual classes. Melanie in our office is now certified by the Inspector General for that. I did contact them recently to see if they were going back into the field, and we're going to chat on Friday. They are starting to think about that now, and suggested if Southborough were willing to host something, we're in a great location to bring people from other communities to do something like that. I don't know yet, if there's a cost associated with that. but that's something we're looking to work out with the Inspector General's office. In addition, some of the other comments that came back were technical skills, GIS in particular, Viewpoint. We've had a complete turnover in our building department. Viewpoint is a permitting software. There are a number of other departments that also use that. There would be a cost, to that. There would be a cost to GIS training. OneDrive is another area. We're trying so hard to move things to the cloud, and not all of our employees really understand how OneDrive works. So that's something else that, Jay and I have been talking about. Just to kind of wrap that up, some of the other topics that came up were, time management. A number of people commented on stress management. Even more commented on emotional intelligence and burnout prevention. And mental health stigma was something else that came up in those comments. So those are some of the things, we're thinking about for, next year. We don't have any specific costs identified right now. We can gather those pretty quickly for the board, but I just wanted you to know what came up in comments from employees.
Okay. So historically, we have budgeted around $3,000 for this, and I believe we had $3,000 in our budget last year, and select board asked us to add the $4,000 to get to $7,000. And I know it's fairly arbitrary, but are people comfortable with $3,000 again for that? John?
Having listened to what Vanessa just said and some very specific apropos problems that are going on in society today, I wouldn't be adverse to keeping it at the $7,000, but everything's gone up anyway. Prices were.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to, when I meet with Vanessa and Mark, talk a little bit about more of a strategy for both the free learning opportunities, and then if there are some very specific learning needs that have come up from the survey that we need to think about how we invest funds for. So I would be in favor of keeping the budget at the higher number, but coming back with a proposal and a plan around how we might use that money over the course of the year, so that we're not at the end of the year and trying to cram things in. I also think with some of the free training, we could do some more structure around that, so that if there are opportunities or topics that are more relevant for people that are in department heads, how do we recommend 3 or 4 of those for them? Like, just create some different categories to help people, to guide people toward opportunities that might be more relevant for them, as opposed to them having this long list and they're kind of picking through. So we can talk through that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer. I think it would be helpful, rather than, because I think it gets a little bit difficult sometimes, when you ask the departments, what do you want to do? And, we take a look at everything, we make a decision, and then people are like, well, yeah, I wanted to do something, but not that, right? I think it'd be better to put together a plan for the year. Here is what we're going to do. Here are the things we want to, and then let them look at the plan. And then we can look at making some changes here or there. But I think it's much easier if you define the path and then let people decide where they want to stop on the path, and if they have any differences. But I think that's a much better approach. So I would appreciate, the collaborative approach with personnel board on that.
Okay, let's pencil in 7,000 there. Office supplies.
That's generally, when we do those handouts for town meeting of the SAP and so forth, if anything unusual comes up, but that's certainly manageable.
Okay, let's leave the 150 food where that's a 0. Dues and membership, are we going to need that?
So that's the association, the MHR, the Mass Municipal Human Resource Association, that the community belongs to. I wanted to take a quick opportunity, we hadn't done this yet, and introduce Emily Boutin, who is our new payroll and benefit coordinator. So Emily and I have been chatting about getting her to some of those trainings for additional development opportunities.
Okay.
And that covers the whole community. Any department head, any personnel board member certainly is welcome to attend those MMHR meetings under that dues cost.
Okay. Well, on behalf of the board, welcome, Emily. Look forward to working with you.
And no pressure, but she's excellent. Yeah, she's done a great job so far. So again, this is just one more example of, you know, our hiring process and our ability to bring, you know, really good people in. And who fit, you know, very seamlessly in our organization. So very glad she's here.
All right, so it looks like we would have a level budget for this year, which happily is exactly what the select board was already told. If it turns out that we don't think we need to spend we won't need $7,000, we can certainly reduce going forward. So I will make a motion that we approve a budget for FY 2025 for the personnel board of $14,875, which again is exactly the same as our budget for this year. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Barry, just a discussion point on that, because I got cut off somewhere in there. I know we're late, so we didn't really have an option to go up here, right? Like weren't budgets were due previously, but I do think there should be a general discussion. I don't think it's a board agenda item with select board and advisory to create some flexibility in these line items. Technically, we can bottom line spend. I know from a transparency perspective, we detail these out so everyone knows where we're going to spend it. But this will allow like us to enable and work towards some of Michelle's thoughts between now and July 1st. And I don't think we need to bog down the budget process. So I think when this gets submitted, there should be some disclaimer that we may choose to change how we approach tuition reimbursement, training, et cetera, but we're committing to the number you just mentioned from a bottom line perspective to just give us flexibility, but also put them on notice that we may blow through one line item and not through another.
No, that's a good point, and it has come up in the past, and we've had discussions about whether we can or cannot move funds from one place to another. So I'll follow up on that and make sure that we get that message across. Okay, there's a motion. It's been made and seconded. All in favor, Ms. Jasinski?
Aye.
Ms. Jones-Johnson? You're mute again. There you go. We can see your lips move.
You're gonna go with the thumbs up.
That was an aye. Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That is approved. Thank you. Okay, is there any other business? Come before the board, any public comments? Seeing none, calendar, as I communicated to you, Kate Federoff is not available on our previously scheduled January 10th date. And because it is my sincere hope that we'll be able to present a quote final version of the handbook at that meeting, it's imperative that she be there. So far, it looks like people can do either the 12th or the 17th. Do either of those days work for you, Michelle?
The 12th is probably a better, either of those days, actually, now that I'm looking at it, could work.
Okay.
I can work on either.
Okay, we'll communicate with Kate today and pin down one of those, and we'll get back to you hopefully today so you can put it in your calendars. And
Perfect.
then we would be just looking at calendars, we would be looking at February 7th for our
You wanna
next,
go with the second Wednesday?
oh, that is the first, I'm sorry. It would be the 14th, Valentine's Day. Does that date work for people?
Mhm.
Not for me. I can't make the 14th.
Okay.
Okay, is there another date that week that would work for you?
I am supposed to be out of town.
Okay.
That's my plan right now. I guess I can bring my computer with me and do it. I can do that. I'll do the 14th. I'll just bring my computer with me.
All right, thank you. So we'll do February 14th. Yes. Great.
We're ready.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second. Oh,
All in favor, Mr. Zelinski,
I,
Ms. Jones Johnson,
aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
bye, everyone. Have a great holiday.
Have a great